All right, you guys, we are back with 5.4, Pampering and Feeding Time. So, for today's lesson, we're still talking about Carlos and Carlita and their pet sitting business. Today's essential question is, what can we conclude by graphing constraints of a scenario? So today's not necessarily something totally new. We're just kind of practicing some things that we've talked about the last couple lessons. So, Carlos and Carlita, their pet business. We've already talked about things with like the size of pens for the cats and dogs and what money that was involved and stuff. Today we're going to talk about two more variables. One of them is feeding time. So in terms of feeding, cats take 12 minutes to scoop out the litter box and feed them, and dogs take 20 minutes for a walk and feeding. Now, I think Carlos is doing this one, and he only has 8 hours for feeding. With all of these inequality problems, if you're going to use variables like x and y, you need to define those variables. So I'm going to say that x is the number of cats in Carlos and Carlita's business, and y is the number of dogs. Now, it takes 12 minutes per cat and 20 minutes per dog, so the total time for feeding is going to be 12x plus 20y, and that needs to be less than 480. Now, the number 480 didn't appear anywhere up there. This came from the fact that the cats and dogs were in terms of minutes in feeding, but Carlos only has 8 hours for them. So I did a quick 8 hours times 60 minutes is 480 minutes. So the whole excuse me, problem is in terms of minutes. Next, we will find the x-intercept of this equation, or of this inequality. So remember, to find an x-intercept, you make y 0. You always make the opposite thing 0. And just pretend it's an equals sign. We don't need to worry about the alligators to find the intercept. So the cool thing about throwing a 0 in there is it gets rid of that whole part right there. And we just get 12x is equal to 480. So then if you take 480 and divide it by 12 on both sides, that means x is, what, 40? I feel like my brain's not working a bit today. Yeah, it's 40. So the x-intercept is 40, 0. If you want to think about that in terms of the problems, it's like if Carlos chose to only feed the cats, he could feed up to 40 cats with his 480 minutes. Y-intercept, we're going to make the x value 0 and solve for y. Once again, the 0 is nice because it gets rid of that whole part right there, and we just get 20y is equal to 480. Divvy both sides by 20. Y is going to be 240, I think. Wait, am I doing that right? No, 24, jolly, come on. There we go. Which means the y-intercept is 24. So, in terms of graphing an inequality, if you have the x-intercept and you have the y-intercept, you don't necessarily need to put it into y equals mx plus b form, because if it's a line and you know 2 points on the line, technically we can just connect those 2 points, which is what we're going to do right here. The y-intercept was 0.24, which is right here. Please notice that I have my number of dogs on the y-axis and my number of cats on the x-axis. I've also done appropriate tick marks that go out to what the intercepts are. Like, I knew that the y-intercept was 24, so my y-axis needs to go up to at least 24. I know the x-intercept is 40, so my x tick marks need to go up to at least 40. So here's 0.24. That is the y-intercept. And then here is 40, 0. That is the x-intercept. Now let's see if I can do a line. Close enough. Here's what we'll do. There we go. Old teacher trick. Just make your points bigger. So this represents the equation for feeding. So every point on this line would be cats and cat and dog combinations that equal exactly 480 minutes. But because it's an inequality, and we'll write it up here. That's not what it is. What is it? 12x plus 20y is less than or equal to 480. Whenever you graph an alligator, there has to be some sort of shading involved. So the way you figure out on which way to shade, which side of the line to shade, is you can pick a point. Like, let's take a point like here. Let's say this is 15 dogs, or 15 cats, excuse me, and 6 dogs. And then you can check that point to see if it works in the inequality. So 12 times 15 plus 20 times 6, and we're wondering if this is less than or equal to 480, if this is a true statement. So 12 times 15 is 180, 20 times 6 is 120. We're wondering if this is less than or equal to 480. 180 plus 120 is 300. So then you ask yourself, is 300 less than or equal to 480? This is true. It is. So what that means is that you would shade on this side of the underside of the inequality, because that's, you tested a point in that zone and it was true. So you shade all of that. That means that any point in this zone is going to give you a true inequality, and any point over here is going to give you a false inequality. Also, ones on the line will also work because it's a less than or equal to. So these are all true as well. But anything over would give you a false. Now, pampering time, that's like then, you know, cleaning, washing, brushing their teeth, I don't know. For pampering time, each cat is going to take 16 minutes. Each dog is going to take 20 minutes. And I think Carlita is doing the pampering and only has 8 hours to work on cats and dogs. So what you need to do is basically do everything I just did with the first problem about feeding, but you're going to do it for pampering. The steps I need you guys to take: define what X and Y are. Like, say X is equal to whatever and Y is equal to whatever. You should always do this with word problems where you're using variables. Then write an inequality, very similar to Carlos's inequality, but one for Carlita. Then find the X and the Y intercepts by making X and Y 0, sketch a graph, and then pick a point, test it, and shade it. All right, you guys, we will catch you next week for 5.